In this first part of the series, we're going to focus on various ideas behind sacrificing a knight or a bishop on f7 square. The first game I want to show you was played in 1898 by Siegbert Tarrasch, one of the most influential and strongest chess players of the late 19th and early 20th century. Let's look at the game. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, typical development that you see even today, bishop c4, bishop e7. This move is aimed at preventing knight g5, and it leads to slightly more peaceful positions than moves like knight f6, leading to two knights defense, attacking the f7 square, or Italian game that you can get to after bishop c5. So bishop e7 was played in the game. d4. This is the main idea of this opening, attacking e5 square. And black has two choices. One, they can trade on d4, or they can defend the pawn on e5. This game, black chose to take on d4. Knight d4, and for the next several moves, both sides, white and black, continued their development. Rook e8, rook e1. So here we reached a very critical position for this particular game. Black played knight d7, a seemingly harmless move, preparing potentially something like knight e5. But this move creates a couple of weaknesses in black's position. Look at this bishop. It has nowhere to go. It's surrounded. Look at this queen. It's completely surrounded on every square by its own pieces. In fact, if it wasn't for this pawn on f7, playing knight e6, white can just capture the queen. And so this weakness, or this crampedness of black's position, enables white to perform a beautiful combination. So bishop takes on f7. Tarrasch sacrifices his bishop for the pawn on f7 and the chance to open up his opponent's king. King f7. And now look at this blow. Knight to e6. Trying to capture that queen. Saying, I don't care if you can take me. Take me. I dare you. And black said, sure, I'm going to take you. The next move is queen d5, check. The only square to go for the king is to f6, and that is followed by queen f5, checkmate. We just saw a beautiful game played by Siegbert Tarrasch over 120 years ago. And this idea of capturing on f7 and following it up with knight e6 attacking the queen, this beautiful idea keeps appearing in games over and over again to this day. Let's look at another game. 60 years later, after Tarrasch's game, another game was played. And this one was played between young Bobby Fischer and a very experienced grandmaster, Samuel Reshevsky. An interesting bit of trivia. This game started a rivalry between two grandmasters, and to this day, Sam Reshevsky and Bobby Fischer tie for the all-time record of 8 wins in the US Chess Championship. The game started with e4, c5. Very different opening from Tarrasch's game. Knight f3, knight c6. Very typical Sicilian that you can see today, and in fact you do see it today. Reshevsky went for an accelerated dragon, waiting with playing d6, hoping at some point to play d5 in one move. Bishop e3, bishop g7, bishop c4. One of the things I want you to take away from these games is that anytime, if you're playing black and your opponent puts a bishop on c4, start worrying about this pawn on f7 and start constantly checking, am I gonna lose if white takes on f7? And if you're playing white and you have a bishop on c4, start thinking about that pawn. Can I take it and win? So knight f6, knight c3, castle, bishop b3. This is a very typical move. One of the ideas here is that if white castles, black can just take on e4, and if knight takes e4, play d5. And so This is very typical in several openings, and so white tries to avoid this by playing bishop b3. And so, as I said, Sam Reshevsky was a very experienced grandmaster, and he feels some danger with this bishop on b3 eyeing that pawn on f7, so he decides to trade it by playing knight a5. Fischer pushes forward, e5, knight e8. And now look, very similar motive to the previous game. Bishop f7. Boom! What happens? What if I take with the rook? Well, you can take with the rook, but then I'll play knight e6. And look at this queen. There are no squares for the queen to go. One is controlled by the knight. The other one is controlled by the bishop, and everything else is taken up by black's pieces. What if I take with a pawn? Well, then you're going to lose the queen because the pawn is pinned. So you couldn't take with the rook. Neither did Reshevsky, so he took with the king. But Bobby said, I am still going to go knight e6. And after some consideration, Reshevsky took that knight with the pawn. Turns out that if you take with the king, there's a forced checkmate. It's a little bit long variation, but it is all forced, so it wasn't that hard to calculate, and I'm sure both Fischer and Reshevsky saw that checkmate. So Reshevsky decided to take with the pawn. He gave up the queen and eventually lost. And here's another bit of trivia. This same position, the one that you see on the screen, this same position appeared multiple times after that game. The last time I checked, it was played in 2016 by several FIDE masters. So it really pays to know these ideas and study old school games. We just looked at a couple of games where the capture on f7 was possible because of the crowded position of black pieces. Now let's look at a slightly different idea. In the next couple of games, the idea of capturing an f7 is just simply to open up the opponent's king and then bring up as many pieces as you can to the attack. When we talk about this idea of sacrificing a knight or a bishop on f7 in order to break the defenses of your opponent's king and lure the king out and then checkmate it, it's really hard not to mention the fried liver attack. So let's look at one of the games that was played by a famous English grandmaster, Jon Speelman, back when he was a kid in a junior championship. And for those of you who don't know, fried liver attack arises out of two knights defense. So knight g5 begins the two knights defense. The idea here is that right out of the gate, white says, I am going to attack that pawn on f7. The only way to really defend this pawn is to push the pawn forward to d5 and block this bishop. White takes the pawn and black takes the pawn back. A very natural move. And here the fried liver attack starts when white takes the pawn on f7 and sacrifices the knight. This is not the strongest move in this position. And also, when we talk about sacrificing on f7 with the idea of just opening up your opponent's king, sometimes those sacrifices are not necessarily correct. And if you take a computer and look at that position with the computer might say that after knight f7, black might be okay. And sometimes it will say that black is better. But I tell you one thing, if you're playing this position, it's much easier to play as white than it is as black. And if you look at the actual games, I believe that the results show that white wins way more than black, despite the fact that the computer says that position is about even. So black takes the knight, queen f3 check, and this is a fork, giving a check and attacking the knight on d5. The only move that both defends from the check and defends the knight is king e6. And this position for white, it just plays itself. You have two pieces attacking the knight on d5. You have two black pieces defending. So the next move that white does brings the next piece to the attack. Now there are two ways black can defend the knight. Knight e7 or knight b4. In this game, black chose to play knight d4. And white continues the attack with d4, with every move white brings one more piece to the attack. Well, in this case it's 2, the pawn, and opens up the bishop. c6, an extra defense for this knight. Queen e4. Again, two ideas here. One is attacking the pawn on e5. The other one is attacking the pawn on c2. So knight c2 doesn't happen. King f7. Black wants to get that king to safety. That was the idea behind the move c6. So the king moves away. There's still 3 defenses for this knight and 3 attacks. Now black also plans to play bishop e6, bring another piece to the defense. In this position, like I said, there are 3 defenders and 3 attackers, and white says, I am gonna kick out one of these defenders, this knight on b4. And white plays a3. Now black doesn't want to move the knight back because the knight on d5 becomes non-defended. So black finds another defensive resource, which is queen a5, pinning the pawn. So white takes the knight on b4, black can capture the rook on a1. And white says, I don't care. I don't really need that rook. It's all about pieces that are in the game, not pieces that have not moved. And the only move black can do is take this rook. And white takes the knight on d5. Giving up another piece, bishop on c1 with a check, king e2, and queen h1. So now we have a position where black has 2 extra rooks. And that is a very significant advantage. The only thing white has are those 3 pieces that are participating in the attack. But let's look at the position. Out of 5 pieces that black has, 4 of them have not moved once during the entire game. And this queen on h1 is completely out of the game. So in reality, despite this drastic material advantage by black, white is playing with 3 pieces against just an empty king. So the next move, knight c7 check. This covered check also doesn't allow black to bring the bishop to the defense because white can just capture it. King e7. Queen e5 check. Collecting some pawns and getting closer and closer to the opponent's king. King d7. Knight takes rook. So now white captured one of the rooks back. And the attack still continues. Black still has those pieces that haven't moved. Queen g2. Black is in a hurry to bring the queen somewhere to the defense. Queen c7. Check. In this position, black resigned. The only move that black king has is 2e8, which will be met by bishop f7 checkmate. So this is an example of the fried liver attack and the play that arises out of it. Now let's look at another game where white sacrificed a piece on f7 with the idea of opening up the opponent's king. This game was played in 2015 in Russian Rapid Championship between 2 grandmasters. On the white side we had Grandmaster Maletin, and on the black side we had a Grandmaster Popov. The game started with Reti opening, and black transitioned into what is known as Spassky variation of King's Indian attack. The idea behind this move is black is planning to amass a pawn attack on the queen side with moves b5, c5, d5, maybe even a5. Let's see how white handled it. Knight a3, b4, knight c4. e6, bishop g2. White is just continuing with development. In general, if you see an opening that you're not familiar with or something that looks odd, always remember, control the center, develop your pieces, get your king to safety. If you follow those 3 principles, you will be okay. Oh, and don't blunder. d5, knight e5. Look at that nice knight on e5. It took a while for that knight to get there, but it got there. Knight d7. This is a very strange move. I guess the idea is either to support c5 with the knight, maybe attack the knight on e5 and trade it, but black is behind in development. Look at this position. White has 3 pieces already developed. 2 blacks, just 1 piece, knight on f6. And instead of playing something like bishop e7 or bishop d6, getting another piece in the game, preparing to castle. Black just retreats with one already developed piece, well, with the only one developed piece, to d7. d4, like I mentioned earlier, those three principles: develop your pieces, control the center, get your king to safety. That's what white does, develops the pieces and controls the center. c5. So black is behind in development and starts action in the center. Not a good idea. I still think bishop e7 and bishop d6 and maybe knight e5 for the right moves. e4, white is ready. All of the pieces are active. This bishop is open. The queen can jump into the game. The king is one move away from castling. White says, bring it on. Bishop b7. This is probably the last chance black had to either develop the bishop on e7 or trade the knight. Black is behind in development. Taking away this knight on e5 might be a good idea. Developing your piece castling is also a good idea. Instead, black plays bishop b7. And again, this awkward position of black pieces allows white to capture on f7 and break the defenses of the king. Now, black has multiple moves with the king. None of them are really good. And in this difficult position, black chose to play king e8. Knight takes on e6, queen f6, and knight c7 check. So at this point, white's attack already succeeded. White can capture on a8 and be even material, or slightly ahead, as a rook and two pawns for two pieces. But the attack is just starting. King f7, e5, queen c6. Queen f3, white brings another piece to the attack. King g8, bishop h3. What a beautiful move. Now black cannot capture the knight because of bishop e6 checkmate. What a beautiful checkmate. And how do you defend against this checkmate? Well, the only move is h6. Bishop e6 check anyway. King h7. And bishop takes the pawn. Using this pin, so now the queen needs to go, probably take the knight, and then bishop can capture on b7, and then threaten on a8. Queen c7, bishop b7. This is a very difficult position for black to defend. There isn't really a clear way of doing anything, really. Maybe knight b6, defend this rook. Black chose to take the pawn on d4, which white responded bishop e4 check, king g8, and queen b3. At this point, black resigned. The only move is queen c4, and after queen c4 is a checkmate. We've looked at two common ideas behind sacrificing on f7. One was to use the cramped position of black queen, and the other one was to open up or break the defenses and lure the king out. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you've learned something new. If you have your own games where you sacrificed on f7, please post them in the comments. I would love to see them. Finally, here are a couple of exercises for you to practice looking for sacrifices on f7. The question is the same across all of the puzzles. Can white capture on f7? If yes, how will they proceed with the attack? If no, how will black defend? If you enjoyed this video, leave me a comment, tell me what you like about it, hit that like button, that subscribe button. Also, if you have other questions about chess, I stream on Twitch, join me there and let's talk chess.